So 4 years ago, I had the incredible opportunity to go on a trip with my family to Kenya to help build a school. We went because a few years before that, my dad went on a trip with his friend to Kenya to help build a school with an organization called Free the Children. Now, for those of you that don't know, Free the Children is an international charity and educational partner. They believe in a world where children are free to reach their fullest potential. In Africa, they have a child-focused development approach so that they give community members the education, skills, and opportunity to lift themselves out of poverty. This is a picture of a school in a village called an LRI. As you can see, this is their school. The walls are falling apart. It's not a very good learning environment. This is a picture of two of the schoolhouses that Free the Children has built in the same village. It's a much better learning environment so that the kids can have a better opportunity to learn. So, I always wanted to go to Africa because I was a big fan of The Lion King, and I wanted to see The Lion King in real life. When my dad came back from Kenya, he kind of talked with my mom and with my family. He said that it was an incredible experience and that he thought that we should all share that experience. So in 2009, we all went to Kenya, and the first time I went to Kenya, I didn't really get a lot of the things that I was seeing. There'd be times where my mom or dad would say, Max, take note of this, or make sure you process this is really important. I didn't really see it that way. All I wanted to see was the animals. There was one day when we were doing a walk for water with the mamas in the village. They wanted to show us how long it took them to get water and where their water source was. So we walked about 5 kilometers, and at the end of those 5 kilometers, we got to this. This is the Mara River. This is the water source for the mamas that we were with. As you can see, it's dirty, it's brown. This is the water that they use for cleaning, cooking, and drinking. They also carry the water back those 5 kilometers with that jerry can at the bottom. It's very heavy, very uncomfortable. It hurt a lot. It gives you a big dent right here when you carry it. So I wasn't really a big fan of carrying the water, and I didn't really understand why we were doing this. On the way back from the water walk, I was walking with my mom, and I kind of asked her, is this our vacation? Because I don't see the point in walking to get water. I don't see the point in why this is important. The first time I went to Kenya, a lot of things just went right over my head, and I didn't really get any of it. So a few months after we got back from Kenya, me and my mom went to an event in Toronto called We Day. For those of you that don't know, We Day is this big event held by Free the Children. It's hosted by their 2 founders, Mark and Craig Kielburger. They bring in some musical guests, and they bring in a lot of motivational speakers like Al Gore, the Dalai Lama, and they all speak about the same theme. The theme that kids have the power to change the world. They can make a difference, and they can be the change. They don't need adults' help. They can do it themselves. So when I heard about We Day, I was obviously excited to see the musical guests. But as soon as Mark and Craig came on stage and started talking, my focus immediately shifted. Just like the thousands of kids in that arena, I became inspired. I became inspired to make a difference in my own community. So I emailed my teacher back in Winnipeg from We Day, and I told her that I wanted to do a fundraiser, do a pencil drive in my school. I wanted to raise pencils so that one school that Free the Children was working with could have pencils so that the kids could learn. So I get back to Winnipeg, we do the fundraiser, it was very successful, we got about 1,500 pencils. And over the course of that year, there's this thought that starts to develop in my head. This thought that I need to go back to Kenya. I need to go back to Kenya and I need to experience it all again. I needed to take it in, but through my eyes, not through my parents' eyes. I want to make sure I understand it and develop my own opinions about it. So I asked my 2 friends if they wanted to come with me, and they said yes. And we knew of the school in Victoria that was going to Kenya, so we emailed them, and we said, would it be okay if we came? And luckily they said yes. So we met with the school in Victoria and Calgary, and we all flew together to Kenya. And as soon as I got to Kenya the second time, I knew it was going to be a different experience. I was older, I was more mature, and I just felt like I was taking things in more. So we're in this village, and the village was called Ingoswani, and we have a camp that's next to the school where we were building. And one night in that camp, we were doing a program about Canada's consumption of resources, and we were focusing on water. And we were saying how Canadians, and in Canadian society, we use a lot of resources that aren't really necessary. Things like sprinklers, things like leaving the tap on while we're brushing our teeth. Luxuries that we can afford, but when we think about it, it's just wasting water. I mean, yes, it's nice to have green grass and have a nice garden, but do we really need it? I thought back to the water walk when I was 13. And then I thought back to this. This is Ingoswani's water source. It's just a little hole, and they have to fill it up with cups and carry it back those 5 kilometers with those little cups. And I thought, do we really need sprinklers? Do we really need to use all this water, to waste all this water? And I couldn't believe how much we were wasting. Then I thought to myself again, there's places, even in Manitoba, in some Aboriginal reserves, don't even have running water. And I couldn't believe that we were wasting all this water, and I couldn't believe we took all this for granted and not even think about it. It didn't occur to me until we did that program. Another thing that I thought about while on the subject of taking things for granted was our education. To me, before I went to Kenya, my education was just a chore, something that I had to do. There's days where I don't want to go to school just because I don't want to and I'm tired. And then one day while I was walking through the school in Ngoswani, there's a few boys and they wanted to show me around their school. So they brought me into this room. This is a picture of one of their classrooms. The walls are falling apart, there's a hole in the roof, so if it rains, they have to cancel class because there's water everywhere. 3 kids would sit to one of those little desks, their textbooks are out of date and falling apart. And yet, while they were showing me around this, and I was kind of thinking how, how could they learn here? They were showing me around, they just had so much pride and joy in their eyes. I couldn't understand why. It occurred to me that they didn't care about the conditions of their school. They didn't care that they had holes in the wall. All they cared about was that they had the opportunity to learn and to educate themselves. In Ngoswani, education is a privilege, and they understand that, and they are so happy that they have this opportunity to learn. Something that I took for granted, something I didn't even think about. And I realized how lucky we are, that we all get to go to school, and we all get to go into secondary education, and we can decide what we want to be. Something that in Ngoswani not every kid has. And I realized again how lucky I am and how much we take for granted. Something that also struck me while I was in Ngoswani. I was walking around in a field, and there's these kids, and they're all playing soccer, and they're all having fun. And they were always happy. Literally, all the time, they had the biggest smiles on their faces. And yet, some of them didn't have shoes. Their soccer ball was made out of duct tape. I wasn't sure, what were they so happy about? And then, again, this thing that struck me was that they don't care what they have. They don't care that their soccer ball is made out of duct tape. All they care about is that they're with their friends. They're together all the time. They're always having fun. And I realized that sometimes we might focus too much on the material things here in Canadian society. That sometimes having an iPhone may be too much of a big deal. It doesn't matter if you have an iPhone or not. It doesn't matter if you have an Xbox. If we were together with our friends, that's really all that should matter. If we're with our family, that's all that matters. And again, it struck me that we focus too much on the material things. Those things shouldn't matter. On the second day while I was in Ngoswani, I was walking through a field. And all of a sudden, this young boy just came up to me and started holding my hand. And in Canada, this isn't something that happens all the time. Kids don't just come up to you and start holding your hand. So when this happened, I was taken aback. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what to make of it. But I thought, I'm in Kenya. I want to put myself outside my comfort zone. So I continued to walk with this boy. I started asking him questions. I asked him, what's your name? He said his name was Mia. I said my name is Max. And that's about the extent of our conversation. He didn't know any English, and I for sure didn't know any Swahili. And yet, we just continued to walk. I tried to ask him questions, how old are you? What grade are you in? He couldn't really answer, but we still walked. Then at the end of the day, I went back to my camp in Ngoswani and went to bed. The next day, I'm walking in the same field, and Mia comes up to me and starts holding my hand. And again, I tried asking questions, how old are you? Doesn't really work, so I go back to my tent and I went to bed. This happens for the next few days, and as time went on, me and Mia created this very powerful friendship. A friendship where it didn't matter if we knew the same language. We were always together. And by the end of that trip, we would do everything together. I played soccer with him. I'd help him with his homework. We'd go for walks. We'd play games. It didn't matter that I didn't know Swahili or he didn't know English. We were always together. And it showed me how universal friendship was, how friendship doesn't need to be this huge deal. You just need to put yourself out there and be open to new experiences and new opportunities. Mia taught me a lot of things about how to make friends, and that if you just put yourself out there, everything's going to be okay, and you will make friends. Before I left for Kenya, my friends would kind of keep on coming up to me and say, Max, are you going to save the world? Why are you going to Kenya? What are you going to do? And to be honest, I didn't know what my impact was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to build a whole school or just nail some shingles to a roof. I had no idea what I was going to impact on the kids there. But what took me the most by surprise was that while I was in Ngoswani, the biggest impact that was made was the impact that they made on me. Without that trip, or without meeting those kids, or having that friendship with Mia, I wouldn't have the outlook on life like I do today. I wouldn't think about school like I do now. I wouldn't think about water like I do now. The community members and the kids in Ngoswani taught me more than I could have ever imagined. They had an incredibly huge impact on me. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Thank you.